What's up, guys? Coming at you from Shenzhen for a quick update, and today's topic is going to be about discrimination in China against foreigners, kind of a follow-up about what's going on. And I'm on my one wheel here, as usual, just having a little ride through Shenzhen. And the reason I wanted to make this topic, I think it's a really important topic, but I wanted to try to think of a way to engage some of my audience in a way that's a little bit better than just saying, I'm disappointed in some of my audience. I think I did say that at one point because a lot of them kind of rejected the idea that there's a discrimination problem. And I want to find a better way to engage the people who say that. And I think that's a really important thing for more people to do, because a lot of people, they build a following on a certain topic and then they create content to deliver to that following, content that they want to hear. And I think there's so much more opportunity for improvement in the world if we tackle the uncomfortable topics that sometimes our own audience doesn't want us to tackle. A lot of my audience might just want me to cover topics that say China is perfect, or just mention the things that are, good in China. And I think we miss out on an opportunity when all we're focused on doing is preaching to the choir and subscriber-based growth and things like that. Now, the other reason I wanted to do it was because, well, first of all, I'll say I've been planning this topic for a while, and I really wanted to do it in a podcast format where I write out all of my ideas, because I love it when people just get to the point directly, and it's hard to do in this format. And I hate it when I finish a video and I forget a bunch of points that I want to mention, and that's inevitably going to happen here in this video, but it's better than nothing because I haven't had time to write out that podcast and kind of do that. So here we are. And so this is kind of, I was inspired to just turn on the camera and do this because I had lunch with a really good friend of mine yesterday. Very interesting guy. He graduated from a Beijing university in the late 80s, and he was on the ground for the entire Tiananmen Square protests. I've been trying to get him on my podcast for a chat, and he agreed, finally agreed yesterday. He was kind of hinting to it before, so that'll be a really interesting topic. But he is a bit of a philosopher, and he's Chinese, and he understands Chinese culture and history so well. He's such an interesting guy. And when I was talking to him about the discrimination situation in Guangzhou, he said to me, yeah, you know what? I mean, a lot of Chinese are racist, and a lot of them don't realize it. Some of them do, and they're just direct about it, but a lot of them don't realize it. But it certainly is a problem. And so I wanted to kind of talk about it because I think there's an opportunity here. There was, so first of all, the idea of racism and the idea of discrimination, one thing we've all got to understand is that I think it's human nature for us to be a little bit tribalistic, to gather in groups together, identify with a certain group, whether it be sports teams, whether it be township to township, city to city, East Coast versus West Coast, whatever it may be. I think we've got this inbuilt. And Guangzhou is a place where it is particularly inbuilt because they're a very proud group of people. And they'll even kind of discriminate against non-Cantonese speaking Mandarin, other Chinese who come to the city, and will reply to them in Cantonese, even though they know full well that that person can't understand Cantonese. And so that kind of emphasizes the situation. And you have had a history of other problems between the communities in Guangzhou. Obviously, this isn't a new thing, but it was kind of a small issue before. You had little issues here and there. There was clearly some discrimination under the surface, but this has brought it out. This has ripped it out and thrown it right in our face. And it would be a terrible opportunity to miss if the people here can't start to say, okay, hold on a second, let's see, is there really a problem with the way that we're thinking here and the way that we're approaching this? And of course, there's a lot of people who don't, because they look at what's happening on the ground in Guangzhou and they think, well, we're just taking, a statistical approach to these issues. And we do it to our own people also. So the obvious one is Hubei. People from Hubei were discriminated against when this was going on. And even, when you're outside and you meet people and you ask them where they're from, they're like, are you going to be afraid if I tell you? We're like, oh, you're from Hubei, aren't you? They're very well aware that people are worried about people from Hubei, and they're a little bit embarrassed to admit that they're from Hubei. But even before that issue, you also had for example, discrimination or stereotypes against people from Henan. So there's a stereotype that people from Henan are scammers. And there were a bunch of things that happened there, like there were some telephone scams that originated there. There were some other events, there's some other medical catastrophes. And so now they're stereotyped as scammers or people that you can't trust. This is just something they do, and they think it's based on statistics. The QR codes is a kind of digitized discrimination. If you really look at it correctly, you had these different colored QR codes. If you were from certain towns in Guangdong also, you might have a yellow QR code and you won't have access to all the same places. That's a kind of institutionalized discrimination against somebody who was from a certain place, or granted, at least was located there for a while. So it's a little bit more tricky to really outright label as xenophobia. But these are all founded in statistics. And now, unfortunately, what we have is that when foreigners are affected by this issue, they don't need to pull out a QR code to identify where they're from or that they're perceived as a higher risk. And it's not like people from Hubei or Henan, where you can't just tell by looking at them that they're from these places. Now their face is their QR code. So now they don't have to pull out their phone. People can say, okay, this is somebody I want to be careful around because I think that the foreign community is at a higher risk of carrying COVID-19 because of the situation overseas. Or in Guangzhou, the case of having a few black residents who got the coronavirus. Now they're saying, okay, yeah, of course we need to put them all into quarantine, and of course we need to not accept them into our restaurants. And they don't realize how wrong that is. Obviously, they don't have the same context as overseas, where we have discriminated against black people for much longer. They've been slaves for a lot of Western countries, and there's a lot of wrongs that they need to right. So there hasn't been as big of an intense lesson to say, this is wrong. Now, mind you, people still do. So you're not allowed to take a statistical approach to discrimination or to policy making in the West and say that, for example, all right, so there is a particular racial group that's at a higher propensity to commit crimes. So we are not, we are going to use more police force with them, or we're going to be a little bit more careful with them. We'll draw our guns a little bit faster when it comes to them. You're not allowed to say that outright, but it happens, of course. People are doing that. In terms of the restaurant discrimination, it's not going to happen on an institutionalized level where restaurants are rejecting people, but you had people avoiding Chinese restaurants when this coronavirus was first kind of heating up. And when I posted something about it saying, that's really weird. And it was weird because, for example, in Australia, they were avoiding Chinese restaurants, but they were going to Japanese restaurants that were still owned by Chinese people. So there was a logical element to it too. However, I had one subscriber who said to me, I'm living overseas, I'm Chinese, and I'm also avoiding Chinese restaurants because who knows if these people just came back from China. And so it kind of made me think of it in a different way. Now, mind you, here, having restaurants actively taking on that mindset and saying, we do not accept black customers like, McDonald's did, that's a whole different situation. That's a whole different level of institutionalized racism or xenophobia or whatever you want to call it. But the founding principles on why they're making those actions, why they're doing that, is the same. Now, even though we're not, so as I said, even though we're not supposed to take this statistical approach in the West, we still do, and it's a little bit harder for obviously, let's say white people to say something about black people, but you've got other people who are doing it for them. Hold on a second. Oh, I had a call. All right. So I give you an example, and this is this highlights the risk of taking a statistical approach. So even the people in China who say, well, we're just taking a statistical approach from it, it creates a lot of illogical action. So for example, discriminating against foreigners when foreigners haven't been allowed in China for a long time, they've obviously passed the 14-day period of risk. So a lot of it doesn't make sense. And so there's good reason to be a little bit cautious about how we use statistics to treat specific groups of people. There's one example that kind of comes to mind, which was with Candace Owens. So Candace Owens is a political commentator in the US. She's African American, and she's a Trump supporter. She's very right-wing. And she loves to put the blame on the black community in terms of saying, well, you know what, the reason that the black community suffers is because there is a higher divorce rate. Black couples aren't staying together, and it's shown that your kids are going to grow up with a a higher propensity to commit crimes or to be underachievers or whatever it may be. So really the fault is of the on the black community. The black community needs to fix this problem. That's using statistics. She puts out a lot of statistics to support that, but it's pretty superficial. She's not going one step deeper and asking, well, why is this community at a higher propensity to have broken families, to have divorce rates? She's not looking at that and stopping short of that. She's not asking what kinds of pressures potentially do these families have that other families don't have. And so you've got to be really careful with how you use these statistics. And even if somebody here says, we don't have this kind of history that we need to make up for, so we're allowed to take this kind of a more statistical approach, and you agree with some of the measures that are happening on the ground, look under the covers a little bit. Look on Weibo. Look at some of the really hateful and racist messages that are being written. They're pretty troublesome. They're pretty concerning. So I really hope this is an opportunity that we're given now to pull something out from under the covers and potentially improve China and improve some of the issues here that might not have been so obvious. The authorities are trying their best here too. I'll give you an example. One of my friends called me yesterday, or it was a few days ago, and he had a friend coming from Guangzhou to Shenzhen, and he couldn't find a hotel for his friend. 10 hotels. They said, no, we don't accept foreigners. And then they blamed the police department. They say this is the local official policy. And then my friend knew that the police put out a notice saying, if you're experiencing discrimination, call us. And he called the police, and the police went and they said, what are you doing to the hotel? They said, you're not allowed to do this, and why are you blaming us also? And then they accepted foreigners after. So there's a little bit of a battle going on here. They are trying to improve it, but there are some issues. There are some issues that hopefully need to be addressed. I hope that a lot of the foreigners who are kind of second guessing and giving up on China and saying, after they've hit this one issue, they realize and they remember that generally speaking, foreigners have been treated really well here for a long time. And granted, there were some issues in the Guangzhou community between the black community and the local community. You look at my example of my interview with my friend from, he's an African-American doing his PhD in Chongqing. Some of you might have seen that interview. It's a really touching story, the one that he mentions where, in America, when he takes the elevator, if the elevator comes up and there's a white lady in the elevator by herself, he'll wait, and he'll wait for the next elevator because he's afraid that she will feel threatened or afraid of him. And whereas here in Chongqing, he was starting to do the same thing in the beginning, and there's a single lady in the elevator, and he said, oh, okay, I wait for the next one. And they would say, oh no, come in, there's a lot of space, what are you doing? We're going up, we're going in the same direction. And it was a really touching story to remind you of a couple of things, that foreigners are, generally speaking, were treated really well here. People are really hospitable here. This certainly has brought out some issues, but generally speaking, we've had it good. Then the second thing is that the discrimination problem and the racism problem in the West is still pretty serious. And I don't think there's many people that are going to try to deny that, but it's an interesting thing to keep in mind to a lot of the virtue signalers who are saying, oh my God, China is a terrible society. No, they've got issues and they don't have everything sorted out, and they've got some things that they really need to think about. But this by no means is some sort of an isolated issue that's special to China because China is a terrible place. It's a global issue, and it ties into those tribalistic kind of tendencies of ours, like I said as well. So you see, this is why I'm afraid of doing things like this. I'm probably missing a bunch of stuff, and I'm rambling on a little bit. But hopefully I've covered most of the stuff. There was in exemplifying. I remember one thing I wanted to mention that I forgot from the middle was when I was talking about police violence towards specific ethnic groups. I remember not too long ago seeing a video of a truck of white guys showing up at an anti-lockdown rally, and it was the back of a truck filled with white guys with huge guns, and it was posted on Twitter. And I remember somebody replied, because the cops were there too, and they were just like looking around like it was a nice Sunday evening or something like that. They didn't really seem too bothered. And somebody posted something that is a really important thing to think about. They said, what if that truck was filled with black guys with guns like that? Would the cops still be so calm and walking around like nothing's going on? And of course, you know the answer. And on the final note, what I think I'll do is I'll leave a video with you that I just posted on Twitter, which I think is really, really drives home. It's racist related from the great Muhammad Ali, some of the things that he said before. But there's something at the end that he says that I really want you guys to pay attention to. And it says, "You won't even stand up for me here at home." Now, it was in a different context, but it has a lot more relevance to today than you might actually realize. And that's because the government, and you can see all these documents coming out about how they want to push this blame China kind of a narrative that's going on. Your government is spending so much money and time trying to get you to blame China while they're doing nothing for you, or at least for a very long time, they've done nothing for you. And this is where their priority still is blaming other people instead of taking care of you guys. I think I'm going to wrap it up there, guys, but let me know if you like this format or you prefer my podcast format where I'm a little bit less rambly and I get to the point a little bit quicker and I don't forget some of the important things I want to mention. But yeah, anyways, whatever the case may be, I will see you guys in the next video.
Go shoot my brother, some darker people, some poor, hungry people in the mud for big, powerful America, and shoot them for what? They never called me nigger. They never lynched me. They never put no dogs on me. They never robbed me of my nationality, raped and killed my mother and father. What, I'm going to shoot them for what? How can I shoot them poor people? I would just take me to jail.
I'm saying you talking about me about some draft, and all of you white boys are breaking your neck to get to Switzerland and Canada and London. I'm not going to help nobody get something my Negroes don't have. If I'm going to die, I'll die now, right here fighting you. If I'm going to die, you my enemy. My enemy is the white people, not Viet Congs or Chinese or Japanese. You my opposer when I want freedom. You my opposer when I want justice. You my opposer when I want equality. You won't even stand up for me in America for my religious beliefs, and you want me to go somewhere and fight, but you won't even stand up for me here at home.